inviting me, Paulo, and thanks for coming here. You'll have to bear with me in English for some time, then go back to something more familiar. I might go too fast. If I go too fast, please ask me to slow down. But I've got a little bit of ground to cover. All right, so you know a little bit about me, and so Paulo said I should talk about CMO 4.0. I was trying to figure out what is 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, but 4.0 I guess is the next generation of CMOs, right? So it's not easy being a CMO. Anyone will tell you that for a CMO today, maybe it's one of the hardest jobs. Most CMOs don't last more than 2 to 3 years in an organization, and often they're under a lot of pressure. And CEOs will often say that CMOs are not doing their job, so I need a chief growth officer, I need a chief customer officer, or I need a chief commercial officer. So you see that the role of marketing and the role of the CMO is under a lot of pressure, right? So I've got about 5 slides to show you some bad news. And then the rest of the presentation is all good news, right? But let's see what the bad news is first. Okay. So this is what CEOs are saying they want from CMOs, right? They're saying that CMOs should be driving growth. They should be driving financial results. They should be trying to find out where new customers are and growing the customer base. They want to improve the brand and reputation. They want to stay ahead. I'm not going to read every point, but it looks like the CEO is saying the CMO should be doing pretty much everything. Okay. On top of that, most CEOs think that CMOs generally are not ready to take over the organization. Only 1/3 of CEOs believe that CMOs can go on to become the leader of the organization. And often that's why maybe even in marketing driven organizations like consumer product goods, often the CEO will come from finance, will come from operations, will come from supply chain. It's very rare to see a CMO suddenly become the CEO, right? And so the CMOs are really trying to figure out how do we answer. On top of that, there are a lot of other people in the organization who, I don't say they don't like the CMO, but they're like, what is the marketing function doing? So often the chief financial officer will be like, hey, marketing, what are you doing? Right? You're spending a lot of money, right? And then I need to go to Wall Street and tell the investor what I did with their investments and why profitability is coming down. So the CFO and the CMO are often not on the same page. Same thing with the head of sales, right? There's a little bit of a tension right now between marketing and sales, because marketing is saying, we drive sales, we are enabling sales. But sales is saying, we close the deal. Okay, this has existed for 40, 50 years. It's not a new value, but the value continues. And then there are other people. So it's very difficult for the CMO today to win influence in the organization and say, I'm doing something of value. So at the same time, CMOs are saying, my biggest challenge is demonstrating the value of marketing. That marketing is not just about clicks, it's not about impressions, right? It's not about how many people like the brand. I don't know how to say that marketing actually drives return on marketing investment. Or how does marketing drive return on assets, right? So with the CEO or the CFO, they talk about the results, the quarterly results. They'll focus on things like sales, profitability, return on assets, return on investment. And often the marketing metrics are not in line with the business metrics. And so it becomes a little harder for marketing to say, what is my value, right? So you can see that as maybe the biggest pain point for the market. So what has happened is also the markets have changed dramatically. Today we have digital everywhere. We are on our phones all the time. We are on social media all the time. Not just as customers, but as people. as societies, we are spending so much time on digital. And if there's one thing that is, I know there are a lot of digital agency people also here, I think digital has sort of distracted marketing from its core purpose. And digital is really important. Digital marketing is very important. But the role of a marketer or a CMO is not digital marketing. I didn't want to put up that slide. But 70% of CMOs say where they spend most time is digital marketing. And I would say you should be spending more time trying to understand the market rather than doing marketing. As a leader, you should really understand that the way markets are created today is very different. So in Mexico, and I come from India, all of you know what's a bazaar, right? A bazaar, right? Long street, lots of people selling their goods, and suddenly one more seller tries to come in and take some space, and he gets shouted at, hey, go away, right? We don't want competition. And then there are lots of buyers. We are all shouting the prices of our products and saying this is the best quality. That's a typical market, right? So if I were to go to a marketplace, that's a market. But I think CMOs have sort of lost track of how these markets are created today. And we still think about how do I keep on communicating to the customer? How do I run more campaigns? How do I spend more, not spend more money, but how do I connect with more customers? Instead of trying to really figure out existentially, fundamentally, what has changed is how markets are created. And it's surprising that in this list, only 10% of CMOs put customers and building trust with customers as their first priority. So rather than focusing on the market and on customers, where you're spending a lot of time is in your internal processes and spending more time trying to understand technology. I'm trying to spend more time trying to understand digital marketing. I'm trying to spend more time proving the value of marketing rather than really understanding what's happening in the marketplace. Now this is a dangerous sign, right? Because the moment a marketer loses track of the customer, then the value of the marketing cannot be really calculated. Digital has completely changed markets in so many ways, right? When we run executive education programs at Northwestern, we start off with by saying that what has changed in the marketplace? Everything has changed in the marketplace. How customers get information has changed. Who customers trust has completely changed. So when I go to Amazon, if I'm trying to buy headphones, I don't trust the brand. I don't trust Sony. I don't trust Apple. I trust the reviews of a stranger. I see what are people saying about this product. I build trust based on other people's experiences and what they've had with the brand rather than the brand itself. So how I get information, how I process that information, how I make my decisions today is completely changed. And so a lot of brands are doing journey mapping and customer experience design without really understanding though how do customers get information and build trust. The other thing is really all about experiences. And to design experiences requires a slightly different skill set. That's where creativity then comes in with data and technology. We'll talk a little bit about that. Right? And we can't take customer loyalty for granted. Just because a customer was with us before doesn't mean that they'll come back. Right? The switching costs for a customer has come down quite a bit. So customers are finding it easier to move from one brand to another. Yes, in B2B it's a little harder, right? I know Salesforce is a sponsor, right? So if I have a whole Salesforce stack, it's harder for me to go from Salesforce to Adobe. But in most B2C, it's very easy to switch to. So you can't take loyalty for granted. So I want to play this short video. I don't know how many of you know this brand called Ocean Spray. This Ocean Spray, anyone? Is it available here? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to play the video and then we'll come back. who are the actors in the market, it is very different from the actors in the market 10, 15, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was with Unilever, I was trying to launch a brand, and it was very traditional, right? You get a product, you got to put it to the distributor, sells it to the retailer, then I figure out my paid media, I spend a lot of money on TV, and then I hope that my brand does well, right? Today, the customer is telling you how they use the product, what experiences they have with the product. If it connects with other people start saying, I like this and I want to do more of it. And suddenly the demand is completely consumer driven, what we used to call pull marketing, not so much push. Right? So I don't have to be spending on paid media all the time. I have to think about what are people talking about my brand, and am I really paying attention to what people are saying about my brand? But that's not enough. How quickly can I use that to lift sales? Right? So here, this brand motion spray, a lot of people are posting videos, but they found an opportunity to say, here's a great way to see what our customers are doing with the brand, amplify it, and drive sales. Right? So they were really quick. If I were to do this campaign 20 years ago at Unilever, it would have taken me maybe 3 to 6 months. Today, you've got to be able to control everything maybe in a couple of days. Right? Otherwise, the moment is lost. So how quick are you? How quickly are you able to spot these opportunities and leverage these opportunities, right? And so, the video drew younger customers to the brand. So yes, there was sales lift, but they got new customers to the brand, right? And there's also a huge lift in the brand metrics. Suddenly the brand felt very authentic because the customers were talking about the brand. The brand wasn't saying, I'm great. Customers were saying, this is how I experience the brand. And suddenly the brand felt very authentic and real, and suddenly the marketplace has changed, right? So that's what I mean by a changing market. The actors in the market have changed, and the information about your brand is completely different from what you think you want to push to customers. And you have to be in touch with the marketplace. So I want to focus on 3 things that I think a CMO or the leader of a marketing function should do, right? The first thing is really move from marketing to being a market maker. How can you create new opportunities? How can you create new markets? The second is how do you move from campaigns? We're running campaigns all the time, right? When we create our annual calendar, it's like this campaign and this campaign and this campaign. But what is the point of those campaigns? What are you really trying to achieve, right? And some brands are sort of doing something really spectacular, and I'll share some observations with you. And the same last point is you're going from just being a brand salesman or saleswoman to an enterprise value architect, conveying to the organization that I'm actually driving value for the enterprise. I'm just not here to drive sales and impressions, right? So let's go to the first one, right? So how do you really become a market maker? What do I mean by that? So often, in B2Bs, we might get some RFPs or RFIs, and the customer might say pretty clearly what they want, right? A standard set of product description, these are all the specifications that I want, this is how the product should work, this is what I'm expecting in terms of service, right? And often we will respond to that very quickly and say, all right, this is what the customer wants. But really, what is much more important, I'm not saying this is not important, but what is much more important is what keeps the customer awake at night. Why are they looking for all these specifications? They're keeping all these specifications so that they can do their job well and they can see it well at night, right? So there's a very nice framework called job to be done. So beyond the functional aspect of the product, what is the customer is looking for from an emotional perspective, from a rewarding perspective, from a self-fulfilling perspective? And so it becomes really important to look at why is the customer looking for this information? And the moment you do that, suddenly you're not selling a product or a service, you're adding a lot more value to your offering. So there's a famous sociologist from UCLA and Berkeley, and he often say that markets are not found, but they are made. So as marketers, we shouldn't be thinking about just communicating and creating digital assets as a job. You have to think about how you're actually making the market. How do you want to get all the relevant actors into the marketplace, and what information do you want to tell them, or what information do you want them to tell others? So if you're doing, purely based on economics, right? All right, this is the price of my product. Based on this price, I will sell so much, and this is the cost of goods, and I have my P&L. That is good. That's all fine. But you also need to think about, how do I sustain this offering? Then you got to look at, all right, what sort of partnerships do I need to build right here? Some people call it community, the digital world calls it platforms, but that's where it is moving, right? So if you want something that's much more durable, and not just a sales transaction, but really a relationship, then you got to think about the sociological aspect of these partnerships that you're creating. And suddenly it's not a sales transaction, it's truly what we call customer relationship management, right? That was actually the genesis of CRM. The term CRM came up in the late 1990s, and IT companies like Salesforce, they took it over and they made it more of an IT and operational thing. But customer relationship management is really about how do we create deep relationships with customers so that we understand their needs and can stay close to the marketplace. So there are a couple of brands, and I teach these case studies at Northwestern. They are both from Singapore. Right, one is Singapore Airlines. Anyone having flown Singapore Airlines? Yeah. Fantastic customer service, right? And the way they respond to you is amazing, right? But it's not just the frontline employee serving you, it's a whole organization culture that is focused on the customer, right? The whole organization is built with the view of keeping that customer in mind. That is what customer centricity means. There's another bank called DBS. Anyone heard of DBS? It's called Development Bank of Singapore. It started in the 1960s to fund infrastructure development in Singapore. It started by the government. 40 years later, they become completely a digital bank, right? Because why? They didn't see competition as other banks like HSBC and Citibank. In fact, they saw competition as Apple. They saw competition in Amazon. They saw competition in Google Pay. And they realized that that's where the next generation of customers are moving. And so if we want to keep abreast of competition, we need to change the way we look at the landscape. And we need to find a new market. We need to make our own market. And so DBS created its own platform. It took them about 15 years of investments in technology, in the right type of talent, and now they've won numerous awards. If you go to the website of DBS, you'll see all the awards they've won in the last 5 years for best banking experience, global reputation, corporate social responsibility, everything. It's one of the few sites that goes well beyond banking. They tell you actually how to lead a sustainable life. So it's not about the banking or your saving or your checking account anymore. It's really about how can you lead your life by taking care of your money. And so it's the number one bank now in Singapore. Citibank actually left the market. They realized that they couldn't keep up. Right? So you have to think about how do I make my own market. And there's some amazing companies that have done this. There are other market makers, right? Spotify is not in the business of music. Spotify is in the business of connecting people. It doesn't matter what you want to listen to. If you think Spotify is just about music, you got it completely wrong. Anyone uses Spotify AI? Yeah? So what Spotify AI does is that it knows your mood. And based on your mood, it will recommend songs for you. That's making a new market. That's creating a new opportunity. Salesforce, Salesforce is sponsored by it. It's a great example. It's not just about the Salesforce product, but when people go with Salesforce, it's with a lot of trust, the reputation of the company. My wife works for financial services, and she's super excited. She's been invited to Dreamforce, right? It gives me a sense of association with an amazing brand. So even in B2B, you can build community. I show you another B2B brand that does that really well. So B2B and B2C are actually converging. Many people say B2B is different. No. It's all about how do I build community, how do I create new markets, find new ways to engage my customer, and then eventually drive sales. Okay. There's another brand that is doing it pretty well. We'll come back to that. So how do you activate markets? The first thing is to really think about your offering not as a product, but something bigger than a product. It's about helping the customer lead their life, whether it's B2B or B2C. You then think about what is the emotional connection? How does that fit in their customer's life? This is the storytelling aspect of it. And then entry. How do I know that the customer will trust what I'm saying? Or will the customer trust someone else? So who should that information come from? Should it come from the brand? Should it come from a creator? Should it come from an influencer? Who should be talking to this potential customer? And then you think about how can I make the offering accessible? And then very important is contagion. How can I drive advocacy? Right? This is how you really make a market. Because in the market, coming back to my bazaar example, you don't have one seller and one buyer. Right? The seller is hoping to get many buyers. And the buyers are talking to each other and saying, you should go to this shop because they give you the best quality fruits. Or you should go here because they give you the best vegetables. Right? The buyers are talking to each other. So that's the contagion effect in the market. How can you drive contagion? It's very important. So don't think about it as just one-to-one communication. Think about it also as amplification as part of market making. So we do a whole lot of, get into much more detail in terms of market making at Northwestern, where we teach our students really from a sociological aspect, from an economic and a financial aspect, what does it mean to actually create a market? If you look at Nike, suddenly they're not just selling shoes. Yes, they are selling shoes, but the way they have created a new market is by engaging their customers. Whenever I go to a Nike store now, it is always crowded. It's always crowded. I was in New York a few days ago, it's crowded. I went to Chicago Nike store, my son just buys Nike all the time. We buy lots of Nike shoes. Right? It's crowded. In the same place, I go to another store, an Apple store, and it's completely empty. Why is one store full and another store empty? Because the way Nike is designing the experience, the in-store experience, is almost like a theater, right? It's like, I come into this, I see something playing there, everyone is going there. I see some other wall, some new thing is going on there, then I go there. It's almost like theater. It's not like clothes on a rack, right? If I go to Macy's in the US, I get so bored because it's the same clothes in hundreds of racks. It's not a great experience. But if you think of customer experience as theater and say, what's going on in this act? What is going on in this act? Who are the players? What am I trying to do here? Suddenly, the way you design experiences becomes very different. John Deere, anyone heard John Deere? Yeah. What John Deere does is amazing. So John Deere sponsors, I also talked about sponsorship, right? So there's a PGA golf tournament it does in a very small town in the Midwest. But it's one of the most popular golf tournaments because everyone who wants to, not just golfers, but also people who love John Deere want to be there. Right? John Deere is about connecting with the local community, that we make tractors, we make farming equipment, right? We show you how to do better. So it's something much more than just a golf tournament. And they create an amazing sense of community, they create their own market. And so it's an integrated campaign. Suddenly it's just not about sending you one more flyer or one more email. It's really about how do people come together. So you can see here that John Deere, their golf tournament was extended through 2030 by the PGA. There's another company that was doing it pretty well, but then fell into trouble recently. Right? So Starbucks is an amazing brand. Amazing brand. My wife hates Starbucks. I can never enter a Starbucks system. But, as a brand, people love Starbucks. The app is fantastic. It's completely personalized. You get rewards. But then Starbucks made a huge mistake, right? Its core market was people who want to come to Starbucks, sit there, enjoy the experience of being in a coffee house. In fact, I was at the Starbucks here just yesterday, and I thought it was a wonderful experience, very comfortable seating. But Starbucks in the US is like a railway station now, right? You have wooden chairs, you can't sit on it for more than 10 minutes. It's so noisy, they play hard rock music. I'm like, why would I sit in the Starbucks to listen to hard rock? Right? I come here to listen to some nice, lounge, soft jazz, chill, and drink my cup of coffee, and Starbucks is like playing hard rock, saying, get out of my store. Right? So Starbucks sales started plummeting. The CEO was fired Because the CEO did not understand the customer experience and the market that the customers expected. So now they've got a new CEO who's now saying, all right, we will personalize. The first thing he ordered was 100,000 Sharpies so that I can write your name once again on the coffee. So they want to go back to what Starbucks actually stands for. So you really have to think about how you're really creating integrated campaigns where it's just not communication, but that communication actually drives commerce. Marketing should stand for commerce, not just advertising. So when you look at marketing, you can really simplify it. Either you don't know your customer or you know your customer. And either they're ready to buy or they want to buy later. Often in B2B, you have long sales cycles, right? If these are your 4 quadrants, then suddenly marketing becomes a lot easier in terms of what you need to do. So if you know your customer and they're ready to buy, let's go. Lead generation, nurturing, conversion, let's try and close that sale. If you don't know your customer, then often you need to go programmatic advertising and offers, all right? You need to bring them in and say, all right, how do I bring you in? How do I get you to learn more about the brand and what we offer? If they're ready to buy later, but you know them, you have to stay engaged, right? Don't lose the connection, because when they are ready, you never know exactly when they are ready. So you have to be ready to jump when they say, all right, I have now got the budget to spend on. Right? So how do you stay engaged? And if you don't know your customer, they then buy later, then that's where you do your big brand advertising. Right? Sort of build awareness and then they're. So this is how you develop both what we call the mental availability as well as the physical availability. This is a very nice book called How Do Brands Grow? I think it's by Byron Sharp, he's in Australia. And Byron says that there are 2 really important things, mental availability and physical availability, which means that you should be available when the customer wants it. So how can you make sure your brand is accessible when the customer is ready to engage with the product? We also do a lot of customer experience design. I unfortunately can't get too deep into it. But again, when you think about customer experience design, people just do journey maps. I've seen lots of journey maps. But what they really they don't think about is, how do I orchestrate it? Who are the actors? And how do I make it more like theater? So when the customer comes in, who's the actor? What do they need to say? Right? What is the communication? What should the surrounding look like? If it's not an inviting space, why would I go there? Right? So you really got to think about the journey maps as theater and how you want to orchestrate it. So that's why I said you got to think about it like a movie director and think about, in this act, this is what the customer wants to hear, this is what I need to do, this is what the surroundings should look like. Right? So the surroundings are very important. All that is, of course, informed by data, and more we're using technology to drive a lot of that creative content. So here it is really important to know what business problems are you trying to solve, and my recommendation, strong recommendation, is to move away from vanity metrics. Vanity metrics are like clicks, impressions. Oh, my brand is getting lots of clicks. Who cares? You really need to move to value measures, right? How is my brand really driving value for the enterprise or for the customer? That's what you need to be. You've got to be much more focused on value. So if you look at what marketers are now using, some of these tools, it's really data analytics and insights to inform some of your creative, AI and machine learning to predict changes, because you need to anticipate what might happen in the next stage of the customer journey and be ready for that. You can't be reactive. You've got to be ready. Social listening, and of course, lots of others. How are brands actually using these technologies? A technology that really enhances the brand idea, you bring it to life. You've moved away from what I say static positioning to dynamic delivery. It's not enough to just create a positioning statement, you actually got to deliver that, and technology helps you do that. Personalization to surprise and delight, and powerful organizing idea as well as innovative new interfaces. So this is how CMOs are planning to use technology. How many of you are a clubman? Anyone? Clubman? Clubman? Yeah, you're a few. Have you had a good experience with clubman for the most part? Sort of. Okay. They do a lot of study on different segments of customers, whether they're families with kids, just couples, and then really trying to then figure out, all right, what is the experience that we want to deliver for our customers, right? So different customers, they've got different journeys, and they've done something pretty amazing. Again, it's a wonderful case study on ClubNet. If you have more time, you can talk about it. But interestingly, they are also using AI, but in a very responsible way. They're using AI that's really tied to their business objectives and core values. So it's really a strategic pillar to improve the customer experience. I didn't want to get too much into agentic AI because I know the next speaker is going to talk to you a lot about agentic AI. So I try to stay away from the agentic AI. But this is an amazing brand that has done a lot in terms of understanding what experiences its customers face. So where companies really using AI, a lot of it in analytics, and of course in driving the customer experience. That's where you can see the top two boxes. And some of them are now using AI in terms of their strategy, in terms of, all right, what new products or what new services would do well in the marketplace. So you might have heard of things like synthetic data, right? So with synthetic data, I can do testing. I can do A/B testing using AI now, which is much more sophisticated. So in terms of your strategy and content, those are some of the other places where these brands are using AI. So finally, let's come to the last part, right? So how do I prove my value as a CMO? What the CEOs and CFOs see is that you're just spending a lot of money. All right? You're spending money on labor, on paid media, on MarTech. Now that's becoming a huge investment, millions of dollars. And of course, you still have your agencies, right? So you're just suddenly spending a lot of money, and if you look at the distribution, it's fairly equal across everything. So basically, the CMO is saying, I need to do everything, right? And the CEOs and CFOs are like, we cannot support it, right? So how are you going to prioritize, and how are you going to show the value of marketing? You can do this. We have actually helped quite a few firms. As an academic, this is one of my pet things to do. I love doing this for companies where I actually show them the value of marketing. I show marketing that you're actually developing assets. You're not spending money. It shouldn't go in the P&L. It should actually go in the balance sheet as an asset. Because what you're building is the future of the business. What you're doing is you're ensuring there are future cash flows from your loyal customers. That's what you're doing as a marketer. You're not just trying to spend more money on ads and drive clicks and impressions. You're strengthening the value of the business, right? And so there's a very clear framework here. As academics, we do this for a living. It's like, we can do this in our sleep. And it's very easy. But this is where I think we need stronger connections between academia and practice. Also, one of the reasons I came from Unilever and did a PhD is because exactly this. I wanted to show that marketing actually drives value, and you can actually do this pretty easily. Okay. So from a CMO's perspective, it's the right time to transform the marketing function. Just like we had digital transformation and business transformation, this is absolutely the right time for a leader to drive marketing transformation, right? And you really got to think about, all right, you need two tools, right? You need a telescope, and then you need to be the conductor of the orchestra, right? So you need two skills, and you need two tools. And so you really got to think about, from a talent perspective, from a people perspective, exactly what do you need to develop? What are some of the foundational capabilities you need to develop? How would that change your culture? Do you want to be Singapore Airlines and really be completely customer focused? Is that the culture you want to set in, or is it something else? In terms of your internal agencies and technologies, how are you going to set up your new roles and competencies? And then from a process framework, what are going to be your guiding principles? Right? What are your key business objectives? What is it that you really want to drive that's aligned with the business? So suddenly you've got to think about this much more strategically and not just as a digital market. So we say that CMO should invest in 3 types of capabilities. Foundational capabilities that any organization needs. Next, core capabilities. These are essential to be competitive, and they create typically cost effectiveness, operational effectiveness. We're able to do things much more efficiently. And last but not the least, which is strategic capabilities. How do I create significant competitive advantage for my brand in the marketplace? So suddenly looking at a much wider landscape, and you're really thinking about how can my organization succeed? How can I command a premium in the marketplace? How can I enhance the reputation of my brand in the marketplace? So you really need to invest in all these three different types of capabilities. Customer centricity as a business paradigm has amazing benefits. And often people don't really understand what is customer centricity. They think that if I just serve a customer, I'm being customer centric. It's much more deeper than that, right? It's really about understanding the marketplace at the end of the day. And so when you are customer centric, what becomes important is that the whole organization is focused on the customer. And suddenly the CMO or the marketing function can take the leadership role in telling the other functions what they need to do to be customer focused. So if I'm Zara and I need to get the latest fashions out in 2 weeks, my supply chain has to be customer focused. My finance, to finance all those raw materials and processing has to be customer focused, right? My sales team has to be customer focused. Suddenly the whole organization has to be customer focused. And marketing can really take the lead because why? Marketing superpower is we know the customer better than anyone else. No one knows the customer or the market like marketing. So you can guide the entire organization. In fact, McKinsey finds a study that CMOs who actually unite different functions of the organization outperform competition dramatically. Right? So the role of the CMO is suddenly not the small digital marketer or creating assets. It's suddenly much more of a strategic role where you're driving both financial results as well as driving the reputation of the brand, with strategic outcomes. Right? So that's really what the CMO has to do in CMO for time. So I'll end it there. I just end with this quote from John Potter. He's the leader in change management. If you want to read a book on change management, he's your go-to person. And we often talk about the role of leadership is to transform complexity. The world is very complex. But how can I simplify it for my function and for my organization? So complexity into clarity and guide organizations through moments of performance, right? That's the leadership. So hopefully this was helpful and gives you an idea of how the role of the CMO will dramatically evolve, or should dramatically evolve from just being a narrow marketer to much more of a strategic thinker. Thanks so much. If you need to get in touch with me, those are my details, but it's great to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vijay. Let me see if there's maybe one question. If we have time for one question.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I once heard a sentence that resonated with me, which is, when you cannot measure the important, you make important what you measure. So I think that's what's happening with the marketers and communications leaders, right? Like we end up measuring interactions, impressions, and all that. And you were saying that we get involved in our own, capability of measure. So my question for you is, what are we missing? Which type of KPIs we should be looking at in order to measure what is important?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that you need to do this and that. You have to show the value of driving clicks and impressions in sales, in profitability, and then return on marketing investment. So you have to go all the way. We are falling short by just doing a lot of marketing mix or attribution models, digital attribution models that are just focused on one platform or for one campaign. We're not showing the entire value of marketing by saying, how does it actually drive annual sales or annual profitability, and how does it actually enhance the reputation of the brand in the marketplace? So we're not showing the entire thing. And I know that's because maybe we are crunched in terms of resources and time and capabilities. But that's something that just has to be built out. So the CMO has to invest in that. A lot of organizations today are building out like a chief data officer or function role, which can complement the marketing function role. So if a marketer is much more focused on the customer, then you need to have like a data team that's backing you, a centralized or a decentralized team, that can run some of the analytics. But you need to set up these models in place. That's what we're missing. I think we're just missing, we're just being myopic, right? Myopic is we're just able to see what we're seeing here. We got to reverse that and see that no, there's a bigger playground we're playing. It's just not that.
One more.
Thanks for the presentation. So I saw this term of cash flows as something new that you were showing. So how do you translate what you were mentioning about MMMs, ROI, etc., into cash flows?
So every organization knows what its cash flows are. So your financial controller knows what the cash flows are coming into the business. So anytime a customer's paying, they know the cash flows. And finance has its own IT systems where they're tracking on a daily basis how much money is coming in and how much money is going out, your costs and your incomes. So you have to find a way to connect what you're doing in terms of your campaigns or your brand spend with the cash flows. So it's not hard to do it. If you're a public company, I can do that for you in a matter of a few hours. If you're a private company, then you need to talk to your financial controller. So that's where the CMO then needs to go and tell the CFO, I will show you the value of marketing. Give me your financial statements. I will put my marketing spend here, and I will show you that whenever I spend money, I actually get you incremental cash flows.
Vijay, thank you very much.